It's up to you. I don't want to.
I love your shirt, Jared.
If it becomes an issue, just quietly go. Okay? Come on in, Fatima. Your group's right here.
Little sec. If you
John
take
Hector, I think you're right there.
this on the third one, and then click. That's okay.
Oh, we all have access.
All right, so we have our resource folders on our desks. We can take out our globalization articles that we read and annotated for homework. Every group should have each member with an iPad or a computer. If you don't have one, you can use your personal device, but I think I had enough to go around. As you know, we have been working on our objectives for the last couple classes now related to globalization. We are looking at the advantages and disadvantages of globalization, and you got a lot of information on that from the reading this weekend. We're also really using our author, Peter Menzel's pictures and his work to study how people around the world view globalization in different ways based on their circumstances. And of course, we're doing all of this by really analyzing Menzel's craft as a photographer and putting all these pictures together. And now today we're going to start to challenge that or look to corroborate it. What's that word mean, corroborate? Did you ever hear that with corroborate evidence? You ever heard that word? Go ahead. Yeah, so to put together or to try to maybe support Menzel's claim and his message with the data that we have. So we might find that it contradicts it, and we might find that it supports it. So that's the work of today. We're going to be digging really deeply into one particular country, and I have chosen that country for you based on the data that was available, and someone in your group, I don't remember who for each group, but has the full color picture of that country in their folder. This is like who has the golden ticket, right? Who has the picture? So I'll give you 2 seconds. Get over the excitement. Okay, everybody's good? All right, moving right along. So we've been working on that globalization objective. We're going to keep working through that today. And remember, for all of today's work, you have your resource folder. You have the text response chart that you've been working on with the pictures and the website, looking at observations and inferences. You also have the globalization article that you read and annotated for homework. You have the data table and the explanations that I provided for exactly what each of the categories for the data table means. And then you have other, the PowerPoint for Bhutan, which was the model that I was going to do with you today, but because we have a shortened period, I'm not going to do that with you as a whole class, but rather I'll come around to your individual groups. If you need help stepping through how to analyze these pictures, I'll be sure to come around and help you. And I also want to point out that in that PowerPoint, I did provide some guided notes and questions that I would ask myself if I was going to be analyzing the Bhutan photographs, okay, that Menzel provided in his project. And then you also have the last thing in your folder should be something called the text-dependent and globalization chart. And I condensed what we were going to do again due to the time constraints today. I condensed our last activity into one page here, or one packet, I should say. So you're going to be answering some questions and completing this chart on globalization towards the end of today's class. All right, so just a reminder, that's what you have there in your resource folders. The homework that you completed is on the back of that text response chart was to answer 2 very simple questions about Peter Menzel. One was his message, and the second was what is the evidence that you can find in his pictures to support what his message is. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, because you haven't had a chance to really talk about this in your groups yet, I'm going to give you about 3 to 4 minutes to talk in your groups about what you thought his message was when you did this independently for homework. Then have at least one person in your group, but more than one person if you would like, because you all have the access, go on to our Today's Meet /slash Menzel, classroom, and type in, remember you're limited in characters, type in for me a summary so we can all see it of what your group felt his message was. And more importantly, what evidence is there in the pictures to support that? So again, this needs to be a summary. It shouldn't just be Michael putting up what Michael wrote for homework. It should be Michael, Thomas, and Kiana talking, coming up with a consensus or a summary of what Menzel's message was, and then one person go ahead and upload those thoughts, type those thoughts into today's meet. If you need to do 2 entries because you run out of characters, that's fine. Okay? So it'll just take 3 minutes. I'm going to come around and help guide you through this, and let's see if we can get some responses up here so that we can all see them.
Alright guys, so who wants to read their thing off
Okay,
first?
so which one?
Yeah.
Let me get that out.
Ready, Sean, you want to start?
I said that Menzel intends to show how different people of different countries live and how that differs, like, I guess, in terms of the amount of money that they have, the expenditures that they are allowed to use. And then the evidence was that the American family was shown with $300 worth of processed food, while the refugee family in Chad had about $1 worth of food. I never got to finish my sentence, but I said that this shows the massive difference in the 2 separate countries, and I guess Menzel is using that to indicate a message, which we have to find today.
Okay, how does that compare with what anybody else wrote down?
I said that there are many factors that go into a family's like groceries, like their culture, their health, their income, and their family life. So basically, he's saying that they're like where you live impacts what you eat on a daily basis.
Right, and that there are some cultural factors and values that might impact that as well.
Yeah.
Why don't you two share with the gentleman now?
I said Peter Menzel is trying to portray different types of people in different countries through their possessions
About
and
his
food.
message, about Menzel's message from that first experience with the website. Alex, what'd you say? Yep.
I just said that like they illustrate like the culinary cultures worldwide, and they, like,
I said
they also kind of like make you appreciate what you have by seeing like what people do.
Do either of you have that same reaction?
Yeah, something along similar lines. Like, I guess it's kind of interesting to see what people have in different countries and how, what maybe some countries eat healthier than others, and some countries may be able to afford healthy than others.
Jason, was there anything from the pictures when you looked at the website that you remember really making you think about some of the differences? Did you need to find your text response chart still?
That's what I'm looking for.
It's not. It may be in your resource folder. It's not in there. Okay, why don't you get and look at that, and then I want you, even if you can't find it on separate paper, to write down some thoughts, and then you guys need to come together, pull that into a summary, and someone put it up on today's meet. And Jason, I see you have it open, so maybe that's a good job for you.
So we're not filling this out, right?
We're not filling this out yet. Nope. Nope, we're just reviewing that homework that Alex has in front of her. Okay? I'll be back to check on you.
Okay.
So what do you guys think about Menzel's message originally?
Well, we talked about like the interactions between countries.
Yep.
And how it can both positively and negatively impact. And like a positive impact is how like it can raise like the standards of living for poorer countries, stuff like that.
What was one way that you guys thought that it can help raise the standard of living for poorer countries?
Like through their economics.
Okay.
Because with their economics, it brings more money into the country, which allows them to buy more things, and then raises their standard of living.
Did you have, were you in agreement with that, Michael?
Yeah, I agreed with that, with the extent of which I'm just jumping off of that with like his contribution to the, by taking photos and things, he can let other people know what's going on, so people can be like more motivated to like help those countries if needed.
Excellent. So you feel like he has like a drive there to
Yeah.
really share with other people because he has the ability to go out and take those pictures.
Yeah, so like in the Bhutan photos, how we see like there's so many different families and so many people that are dependent on such a little amount of food.
Mm-hmm.
People might be more willing to care about it and give more to these countries.
Right, if they actually can see it in the pictures. All right, so try to get something now up on the today's meet, like a summary for your group.
If you haven't done so already, please try to start typing something into the Today's Meet site now so that I can hopefully refresh this and see some of your thoughts as a group, your conclusions.
What is that?
I have it, but it won't let me.
Is it more characters?
Oh wait,
You can only
it
have
still
100
says
characters, so you have to, if you
Gotcha.
want, you can just copy and paste the part.
It's just a period.
That's fine. So what did you guys, I didn't read it yet, but can you summarize for me what you guys came up with?
We basically said that the pictures, first of all, highlighted the differences between each country, but then we could then infer the socioeconomic standing based on education, economic activity, health, things of that nature from it. And I mean, we didn't put this in on our thing, but it kind of highlights the positives and negatives of globalization and how certain.
Right. And you think that's part of Menzel's message?
Yeah. Yep. Trying to get readers to.
You agree?
Yes.
Jared?
I agree.
You concur?
I concur.
All right, let me try to refresh this and see, hopefully, it shows us what people have been writing. All right, so.
Ishan. That's all it says.
Yeah. So I think I have two groups. If we can look up at the board real quick, because you know we do have a limited amount of time to work with each other today. We have two groups that have uploaded a message about, or a summary of Menzel's message, excuse me. So one group, this group right here, thinks that Menzel is really utilizing his pictures to highlight the diversity of cultures and help the reader to infer the socioeconomic standing of each family. Now, do you remember the work we did last week with the website? We were doing observations and inferences. Does that ring a bell? So when we make an observation about a photograph, for example, I saw in a lot of the pictures that I looked at, fast food, regardless of what country, fast food in a lot of the family's photographs. Yes? So that's an observation I made. What's an inference that you might make from that observation about fast food? Amanda?
You can infer that it's widely available across the globe if people in that many different countries have access to it.
Right, so it's widely available. Go ahead.
Starting to diffuse into even lesser developed countries.
Excellent. Starting to diffuse into lesser developed countries. The accessibility, right, the transportation that's involved with fast food and getting it to these remote locations or all these other countries, all right, is something that we can infer from the photographs. Okay, so let's remember how we take an observation and then draw an inference from it. And then the other group up here, which is Ishan's group, Menzel was trying to portray culture and human environment interaction through photos of families, groceries, and homes. So that human environment interaction, that's such a good critical theme of our course. And this group here, did yours upload? Do I need to refresh again? Okay, so can you just tell us real quick what you guys were talking about, Kiana, because you guys had some really great thoughts about his message.
So what we were talking about was how Peter Menzel's photos illustrate the effects of globalization on the world's economy and how each individual family is both positively and negatively impacted. And we also talked about what Thomas had brought up was as globalization is taking more into effect, each family their standard of living is rising. So let's say what we were talking about was looking at the family in Bhutan, where their standard of living is so poor. But since people are becoming more aware of the situation, they may be more willing to help out and try to get them more food and resources that are necessary.
Right, so there was a real humanistic quality that was coming out of what this group was seeing in Peter Menzel's work, and that maybe he's trying to pass that word along and spread that information around so that more people know the struggles that some of the countries are facing that they might not normally interact with. And then our last group here, did you guys get something up here, or is it just, is there someone that might be able to summarize real quick what you might put up there, and then we'll move on?
Kind of echoing off the thoughts of others, we discussed how it's diverse, and then also the fact that, like, for example, we see a lot of traditional foods in a lot of the places, but at the same time you can see the effects of other countries' products going in. For example, we have Japan, we have a lot of traditional Japanese foods such as fish and rice, but then at the same time we see a lot of fruits which are probably imported from, let's say, the Caribbean or something, like fresh bananas and watermelon. So we can see the world starting to get closer together.
Great. And that makes me think of an author that some of you read. Actually, I'm not sure if anybody in this class read him, but he is a very famous author. He wrote about the world and globalization and the interconnectedness of places. Anybody remember the name of his book? Hot, Flat, and Crowded, and his first book was The World is Flat. Thomas Friedman, remember, he kind of said that there are not those barriers that we used to have anymore, okay? That diffusion can transcend all of the traditional barriers that we used to have, so that bananas from the Caribbean can end up in the kitchen of a family in Japan. All right? So the next phase of class today is going to ask you to jump off of these ideas that you're starting to have about globalization and really dig deeply into what Menzel's message about globalization is. So you have your globalization article that you annotated for homework, where you highlighted the pros and cons of globalization according to the source that I got this from. And then you are going to combine that with your skills at observing and inferring from photographs that we worked with last week. And you're going to focus on just your one country, and you're going to step through that globalization chart. Let me borrow yours again, Colton, because mine's not readily available. So you're going to step through this chart with your group. You're going to have about 15 minutes to do this. And what we don't finish with this chart today, we'll pick up and finish in tomorrow's class. And you're going to go through the categories. And to be honest, you can go through the categories in any order you want. And I gave you lots of room because I didn't want you to feel squished in trying to write, but you might not fill all the boxes, and that's okay. These are the same 6 categories that you worked with our charts last week. Okay, family life, health, education, culture. Do you remember those categories? Same categories, but now I've given you very specific questions that ask you, excuse me, to go back to the text, back to the pictures, back to the data table that you have. Okay, back to the data table you have, back to the globalization article you have, and answer the questions and try to get to the point of what is Menzel's message about globalization. Is it positive? Is it negative? What evidence does he provide in his pictures? Right here's the column for that. Or what evidence do you find in the data table to support what you're saying his message is about globalization? Okay? Are there any questions about the questions? So what is the goal of what you're trying to come up with through working through these questions and completing this chart? Justin, what's the point of what we're going to do through these questions and this chart? What are we trying to determine about Menzel's message?
How each family has a different way of living.
Okay.
Their food and all that stuff.
Yep, and how each family has a different way of living. And how else are we going to build off of that in terms of this chart and this specific objective with this chart? Sean Hector?
We're answering the text-dependent questions and using the data to interpret it and then come up with our own conclusions.
Yes, exactly. Come up with your own conclusions and conclusions about Menzel's message regarding globalization. Okay? So I have the timer here for us. I'm gonna put it up for about 15 minutes. And at the conclusion of that time, I'm going to ask you to revisit todaysmeet.com, but at a different classroom, APHG this time, and answer a kind of closure question independently. So everybody's going to do that last part. Okay? So as a group, work through these questions and work to come up with his message about globalization.
Alright,
So you can start with any of those categories that you might want to.
Okay.
And you're just focusing on your country. And which one did you get? Mali?
Mali.
The Ntomo family, yes.
Okay. Let's see. Here, do you want to look at the pictures too? And really show it.
And remember, you can bring up the Material World website too on your individual devices if you want to look at the pictures. I know I only have one color copy.
Alright, so how does Menzel
into what?
Start over. Start over. What
Do you like the question sheet
the question sheet
that
I took from you?
Yeah.
And didn't get back to you? That I have.
Thank you. And what country is it? I was looking at that.
India. Sorry.
Cool.
No, it's piece of information. Okay, so you can start with any of those categories that you want. You don't have to do an order. So if there's one that you really think you understand from the picture, and remember, you can go back onto that website if you want to look at the picture, or you can all kind of share this color picture.
That one. Okay.
Okay? Cool. Make sure you go back to the text for your answers.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And you guys figured out which country this is?
Yep.
Because they wrote it on the back. Okay, sorry. Mexico. So what did you write down here? Open window showing
The toys and that, like,
okay.
they have a lot of cultural aspects, like hanging on the walls.
So you put that under family life?
Yeah.
Is there any message there about globalization that can be found?
Like you could see that they're it's globalized because you can see like the conflicts and stuff, which are more like
Yeah, there's Coco.
yeah,
Right.
which you find in like more developed.
What about the toys? You said you saw toys in there. Do any of those toys look like they could be toys found
In America.
in another country? Yeah, America or any other country?
Most likely. I doubt they're all from Mexico. I mean, none of our stuff is from the United States.
True. So it could be.
Yeah, like some of them, I think they're like building lots and like fairs and stuff. So I'm guessing.
So think about that versus what you were talking about with what you see hanging on the wall. I mean, is there a conflict there, globalization, not conflict, but a conflict between the two types of culture that we've been talking about, folk culture and pop culture?
Like they have their,
They have like pop culture
Home.
stuff, like, but like in their home you see more of the folk culture, but like in what they purchase, because that's more recent stuff, you see more of the pop culture.
Okay, yeah.
And you have these artifacts kind of hanging on the wall that you might not see in an American home, right? They look different. But the toys you might see in an American home. Okay, so there's like a little conflict that the family is trying to kind of find that balance.
Okay.
Right? So it's neat to take two observations sometimes and put them together to see what else you might be trying to say.
So the family is trying to like, I'm just writing it like as a note, but like family is trying
It's
to.
awful quiet over here. Already did all the talking. I missed it. What are you writing down? What do you, family life?
Yeah, like family members, relatives.
We've come up with the fact that in Japan it seems like, at least in this family, that the children take care of the parents, so that might be a societal factor in Japan with their family life. And it seems like they don't have large families, so that might also have to do with Japanese society and their fertility rates.
Yep, and I urge you now that you're thinking of that to find that data table in your resource folder here and look at things like life expectancy for Japan. Look at things like the income in the country. And there's a little bit of a mortality rate here. And there's some things about healthcare and sanitation, and see if that helps to kind of paint that picture more vividly for you, kind of what you're inferring about family life. Okay, because that's a really great point. Does everybody remember how to read that data table from last time? You have the explanations there too. Okay. You found the chart, I see.
Yes, I did.
Excellent. Did you have those? Did you have a chance to answer them yet? Maybe you want to make sure you do that for tomorrow.
Yeah,
okay.
well. Quick question. When you say evidence from text, do you mean this text?
That's a great question, and actually I'm going to answer that with the whole class if you don't mind.
Yeah.
If I can just answer a question from this group with the whole class for a minute. When it says evidence from text, that's my fault. It should say evidence from the text or texts, because your three texts that you have that you should be looking at is the picture, which most of you are looking at right now, but also you have the globalization article that you may be finding evidence in, and you have, sorry, hold on, I keep stealing from you, your data table, okay? So like the group over here, which is looking at Japan, they had some observations and inferences about family life in terms of the older population in the country, and we know some of that from what we learned in Unit 2, but they had some inferences about children taking care of their aging parents. So if you look at the data table, they'll find confirmation of that in things like life expectancy and healthcare. Okay, so that was a good question, Thomas. Sorry, I answered it for the whole class, because you do have three texts that you can be using for your evidence. Okay? I'll be quiet again. Go back to work.
Michael and I were
Was that your only
working on
question?
before.
Yeah.
We never made it to Bhutan.
What?
Did you do the Bhutan one in the chart?
I wasn't able to finish it.
I didn't.
No, we didn't get a chance to finish it last class.
Alright, so we're
Do you
gonna
see that picture on your
hear
phone?
about India.
Yeah, actually.
I think I did too. I'll show Thomas too.
Was I sick that what day we
Yeah,
did
I
it?
Yeah, you're so.
Come on.
Yours.
To post in this.
Okay.
In the sense that we don't really believe that it represents the majority of India's population.
Okay, why is that?
It looks pretty stable of a family. And
Looks pretty what? I'm sorry.
pretty stable.
Oh, pretty stable, yep.
Industrialized.
Yep.
Pretty, yeah.
What's some evidence in the picture that you think leads you guys to believe that? Kevin, what's something that leads you to
Well,
believe that?
looking at the picture, they have a good amount of food for their family. It looks like he has a watch. He has pretty nice clothes on. They're in a nice house, it looks like. While a lot of people in India can't afford all that.
Formal.
Yeah. And if you have your data table,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we were just
you know,
saying.
if you're thinking maybe that's not typical, let's look at things like the GDP, the GNI per person, the motor vehicles per 1,000 population, which might seem kind of silly, but what does it tell us if people have motor vehicles, Jared? What's that tell us about people?
It's only 18.
Yeah, they can afford it, right? They have money, and they have kind of what we call disposable income that they can afford to spend on things like that. So I urge you to kind of look, and even if the number doesn't mean anything to you, look at it compared. You have the United States on here, you have the world on here, so see if that helps to settle the debate.
There's 18 cars.
18 cars.
For every 1,000 people. And what is it in the United States? Do we have
787.
787. So 787. So do we think this family has a car? They could be one of the 18,
probably.
right?
Yeah, they could be one
They
of
have
them.
the standing to be.
Okay, so I think that's a really great point to bring up about whether this is a typical family in India or not. And I urge you to look and see if there's some more information in here that can confirm that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wow.
About 5 more minutes with your groups for today. Before I have to give us our individual assessment.
What are we saying?
What did you guys start with?
50.
Did you just bring in?
We
Oh, you did both of them. Which one are you on now? Income?
Income.
Looking at the GDP
What do you
and
think?
such, that Mexico is one of the more developed countries, and you can tell based on their
Based off their
annual,
income.
their cost of their weekly groceries.
And
Okay, so you're
GDP.
Yeah.
These categories compared, right? Because you have the United States on there, you have the world to compare to, and you know there's a backside to that too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the health. I know you're not in that category yet, but thinking ahead, talk to me about the health of these people.
Did Mexico recently pass as the most obese country?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see that that's on the side,
They
right?
have a lot of soda,
We do.
Right.
which is like a main factor, and but at the same time they do have a lot of fruits, which could contribute to being healthier. But you would assume it's just because it's available in abundance in Mexico.
Right. So what do you think Menzel's trying to say when he puts the picture like this and arranges the items like this so that certain things are more evident than others?
That they're wealthy because you can see some things stacked and it looks like they're more crowded,
Right.
like the
Then maybe
fruit,
this. Yep.
and then the fruit is still over here when you put all the rest of the fruit here, and you can see that they had no room to fit all the fruit and vegetables onto one table, so they have to spread that.
He categorizes
He
them
puts
Yeah, you
like
might be able
together.
to.
Yeah.
he puts all the packaged stuff and the soda in the back,
Yeah.
and all the fruits in the front, which is like kind you would think of like stereotypical of like a South American country because
Right.
it's really available. And then you see in the back that they also have these things that you would probably buy in a grocery store rather than like a market.
Right.
And then
So like, so like it gets more globalized as it moves back into the.
Okay, so we see the impact of globalization. And I want you to think about that in terms of what you just told me about the health too in Mexico. And does Menzel have a message in there about the impact of globalization and some of the types of foods that we see here and the health of this country? And you also saw his TED Talk last week, so I think was pretty obvious about his message regarding health and that. So you might want to think about that when you get to the next category. 'Cause I think that you guys have probably the best example of all four of what he's trying to say about health.
Okay.
Okay? Good work.
so
He's probably saying that like globalization has a negative impact on health.
Yeah.
because like a country that was like so healthy.
What do you think about this family, and then do you think they're typical for a Japanese family? Alex, what do you think? Do you think this family's well off or not?
Well, like they all seem like generally healthy, like they're not obese or anything.
Yeah.
They're able to like provide like TV, which isn't like a necessity to life.
Yeah.
So they must like have enough money.
Right. I don't know why I said health. Did I say healthy? I thought I said healthy by accident to this group. I was talking about health with that group over there. Yeah, income. So they have the television. Now, do you remember this family from the Material World website? I don't know if you looked at Japan. I know your group looked at Japan.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys did. Because they had a lot of information about this is the Ukita family, I believe, from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so do you think this is a typical family in Japan based on what you have here in the data table? And Jason, maybe you can help us with that question in terms of when we look at the GDP and things like motor vehicles per person in Japan. What do we see? Motor vehicles on the front page.
I'm just looking at. Well, this seems based on the amount of food they have. It seems overall typical in relation to the income, which is $317. That's
right. That's just for a week, right? So
daily caloric intake, 2,761. That's not necessarily a lot. And this overall, this is like healthy food, vegetables.
Right. They recommend like 2,000 to 2,500 usually for.
So that seems based on what they eat and what they bought, seems like an average family.
Do you guys agree? Do you think this is sort of a typical family? Okay, so now really write down some of those key reasons why from either the data table, the picture of what makes them typical. Okay?
Okay.
Their sanitation. The population that uses sanitation. That's 32% of them. And then 29% of their population is undernourished.
Say it one more time.
29% of their country is undernourished, and that could be under income because of their low income. Considering that.
I think they're under health, undernourished.
Yeah, that can be. Yeah.
Even something like disposable income.
But that could also be a result of economics because 77% of them live below $2 a day.
Okay, unfortunately, my friends, we have to pause for a moment. Let me explain what I want you to finish up with for the last couple minutes of class. And then I also want you to put what you're working on into your resource folder so that we can finish working on this in class tomorrow. But two things before I let you go. Number one, what we're working towards is for us to move from you guys evaluating what Menzel's saying about globalization to a place where I'm going to ask you to actually develop your own claim about globalization and whether you think it's a positive or negative force in society. So our closure for today, and what I want you to try to do, your very, 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 very best to get done in the next 2 to 3 minutes, I know that's asking a lot, is today's meet /APHG, because I couldn't put in another prompt. I had to make a new one. According to Menzel, and everything you know from your discussions you just had and your work with this material, is globalization a positive or negative force in society according to Menzel? What evidence from the text, remember you have 3, supports the validity of that claim? Tells us why that's true or not. So between packing up your things and answering this, you have like 2 minutes left. Do your very best to get only 140 characters, so don't go crazy. Okay, and then we'll pick up and share these tomorrow and move towards that writing assignment.
Can we mention him alone?
Didn't I give you an iPad? Oh, he has it. Okay.
He stole it.
So if you could all do this individually, actually. So can you do an iPhone?
So each person should be crafting their own individual response on today's meet for this. That's fine. That's fine. That is fine. So I need each person, if you can, I'm sure the teacher will understand if you are a minute late. You can just finish this. Remember, you only have 140 characters. Pack everything in your resource folder, leave everything on the desk, including the iPads, and I'll see you tomorrow once you've had a chance to give me your input on this question.